So if you just want to introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm Tom. I'm 22 and I'm from England, from Manchester in England.
Okay, Tom. Do you have any religious or spiritual beliefs, or a lack of beliefs?
Definitely no organised religious beliefs. I wouldn't say I'm necessarily aspiritual. Like I have, but I don't believe in anything supernatural. Generally speaking, no supernatural beliefs or belief in a personalised God or anything like that.
So do you have anything that you specifically believe with your lack of beliefs?
I believe that the universe is ultimately empirical, and anything that seems supernatural or seems that would require a leap of faith to believe is just somewhere where we don't have enough knowledge yet, or may never have enough knowledge. But that doesn't mean that it's necessarily supernatural.
So how have these beliefs, or lack of spiritual belief, assisted you in comprehending and approaching death, either mentally, emotionally, or spiritually?
In fact, I would say the lack of belief made it more difficult to deal with death. It's not something that I could confront on a regular basis anyway, but I think it was around about the time when I decided for myself that religion and this idea of heaven was a fallacy. It was around that time where I started to confront a real fear of death. So when I was sort of 16, 17, and like it was, I mean, I had other issues going on at the same time as well, but this contemplation of a sort of meaningless death, which is kind of the natural conclusion if you sort of take that empirical view of the world, like that was a large part of my when I went through a depression at a younger age. Like it was very consistent to have those thoughts.
So do you believe that perhaps consciousness is separate from the body, or do you believe that they're one and the same thing?
I mean, it's a very difficult thing to answer, I guess. I mean, obviously consciousness comes from the body, but consciousness itself, you sort of experience your body. So it would seem separate in that sense, even though it has the same origin.
Do you support assisted suicide for people who are in pain or dying already? And if so, why?
I absolutely support it in certain circumstances. So I think it has to be a sort of disease or illness where death is inevitable. Because I think, like, morally, that's the right thing to do. Is if you're sort of preventing people from experiencing pain when there's the inevitability of death anyway, then that seems like the only real option. But like the caveat I would add is that I think there is a potential for it to be a slippery slope, and I think you should be very careful and be very selective in who you allow to do that, because I don't think people should be able to decide just because they've had enough, because of personal reasons, to go out that way. And I think it should just be focused on very sick people and people who would help.
That sort of answers my next question, but I'll ask it anyway, so you can elaborate further if you like. Do you feel that suicide is a reasonable option for a person who is not currently experiencing physical pain, but emotional and mental pain?
No, because I believe the emotional and mental pain it's not something that's intrinsically static. Like it can be changed. It can always be dealt with better or improved on. And I think if it gets to the point where you decide you want to take your own life, and you decide that would be the best thing for you to do, then I think that's a point where you're no longer sane, in my opinion. And that means that you do not have the right, you do not have the ability to consent to that if you're no longer sane.
How do you feel about how society as a whole approaches the subject of death?
I don't think society deals with death much at all, which I think is a bad thing. I mean, it's treated as this abhorrent, disastrous thing, and it's not, and it's sort of avoided in that sense. So no, we don't confront death at all. It's sort of as soon as someone dies, it's like they just. I'm not saying it's necessarily the right or wrong thing, but you sort of take the body away, you sort of hide it, you put it downstairs in the basement, like you don't really deal with it, maybe just a little bit in the funeral, but like it's how, in the morgue, I mean, in the hospital, like it's just, they take it away quickly, it's sort of sanitized, everything, it's sort of brushed over, it's, oh, they passed away, like we always talk in euphemisms, like there's no real direct confrontation of it, and I believe that society as a whole, at least my best guess is that society as a whole would be better prepared to deal with death and death of loved ones if it was more accustomed to it, if it confronted it more regularly.
Right, yeah. Do you feel that there are certain milestones or achievements that you need to fill in your life in order to die happy?
Yes. I'd say I want kids at some point before I die. I'd probably want a long-term relationship with a girl. I feel like I'd want to achieve something. What that specifically is, I don't know. But I mean, like, other than that, there isn't that much concrete where I'd say, I have to do this. I want to achieve something meaningful and leave a lasting impact. But I think what supersedes that, and the most important thing, is to have a positive experience of the world. And it doesn't necessarily have to be, you don't necessarily have to achieve something grand. But I think as long as you experience the world positively and you can leave a significant positive impact in any way, then I guess if I were to feel that I'd accomplished that, then I could die at least satisfied.
Do you believe that there is anything that all people should aspire towards before they die?
No.
What experiences have you had with death? For example, have you had previous near-death experiences, or have you known people that have died?
I nearly died when I was a baby, but obviously I didn't experience that because I don't have the memory of it. In terms of death close to me, I've never been to a funeral. My uncle died a few years ago, 2 years ago, but I was in Australia at the time, so I couldn't go to the funeral. And that was the closest I've sort of been to death. It didn't really feel real because I wasn't there. The only time it did feel real was when I talked to my cousin and my grandma after they died, and I could sort of feel the sadness that they were experiencing. And yeah, at that point, that was sort of the closest I'd come with the emotional trial on the side of death.
What would you like to happen to your body once you're dead?
I'd probably say cremated.
Is there any particular reasons why?
Well, I think being buried alive is it's like the worst thing possible. So if you just want to close off all doors on that one, just make sure. I'd rather be a pile of ashes than buried alive.
Fair enough. What for you would be the ideal way to die?
I don't know if there is an ideal way to die. I think painless, obviously. and in the sleep, so you don't like have to experience the process itself. But if I were to die young, then I would appreciate some time to know it was coming. So if I would like to know, oh, you have 5 years left, or you have 2 years left, or even 6 months left, because I think that would fundamentally change my attitude towards the world and towards what I just choose to do.
So what scares you more, if scaring is the right word, but is that experiencing and going through the death process itself, or is it what happens after you die?
I mean, the idea of nothingness used to scare me a lot, because I think that's the reality is that's, from in my worldview, that's how it will end. But at the same time, like, if you really think about it, if it's nothing, then there's nothing to experience, and it's not really a bad thing. So that doesn't really scare me so much anymore. But in terms of experiencing death, I mean, it obviously depends on the scenario. Like, if I'm going through an excruciating process, then that obviously that would scare me. But if I were to just drift off in my sleep at 95 years old, that wouldn't scare me really.
So you kind of touched on it just then, but the next question is, what do you believe happens after you die? So your opinion is along the lines of the nothingness.
Yeah, I don't think there's any transfer of consciousness in any way. I think it'll just sort of dissipate. I mean, obviously, what constitutes you, the physical matter, will still be in the universe, and your impression as a personality will still last. But in terms of your personal experience of the world, I believe it ends.
Final question: are you afraid to die?
Yes. I think I'm more afraid of dying and wasting my life and wasting the opportunities that you're granted, like to be alive, just to be alive itself, more than actually dying. But yes, I guess death is something which I avoid as a topic, probably because I'm afraid.